20 million people were watching when Pete Townshend attacked Jimi Hendrix on live television. And what Jimi did next, how he responded to being called a fraud, a copycat, a gimmick, shocked everyone watching and turned an attack into a masterclass in grace. 1967, British television, the height of the British rock invasion. Jimi Hendrix had just arrived from America and was becoming the biggest thing in British rock, bigger than the Beatles, bigger than the Rolling Stones, bigger than The Who. And Pete Townshend of The Who was not handling it well. They were both guests on the same TV show, a massive broadcast watched by 20 million viewers across the UK. The host, trying to create interesting television, asked Townshend what he thought about this new American guitarist everyone's talking about. What happened next was brutal. Pete Townshend, one of Britain's most respected guitarists, went on a 3-minute attack, called Jimi a copycat, said he was stealing British rock techniques and adding gimmicks, accused him of being all show, no substance. The studio audience gasped. The host looked uncomfortable, and Jimi sat there listening to every word, his expression calm, neutral, giving nothing away. Then Jimi responded, and in 2 minutes he turned Pete Townshend's jealous attack into the most embarrassing moment of Townshend's career, not with anger, not with defensiveness, but with grace so profound that Townshend would call a press conference the next day to publicly apologize. 6 months earlier, Jimi Hendrix didn't exist in Britain. He was playing small clubs in New York, a backup guitarist nobody had heard of. Then Chas Chandler discovered him and brought him to London in September 1966. Within weeks, Jimi was the talk of British rock. Within months, he'd recorded Hey Joe, and it was climbing the charts. By spring of 1967, he was performing at major venues, selling out shows, and being called the most revolutionary guitarist anyone had seen. The British rock establishment didn't know how to handle this. They'd spent years building the British invasion, sending British rock to America, dominating the charts, defining what modern rock should sound like. And now this American had come to their country and was redefining everything they thought they knew about guitar. Some British musicians were excited. Eric Clapton famously walked off his own stage after jamming with Jimi, recognizing immediately that he was witnessing something beyond his understanding. The Beatles invited Jimi to their recording sessions. Jeff Beck studied every move Jimi made. But others felt threatened, diminished, like their accomplishments were being overshadowed by this newcomer. And nobody felt that more acutely than Pete Townshend. The Who were massive in 1967. They'd pioneered the art of destroying instruments on stage, Pete smashing guitars, Keith Moon destroying drum kits. They were known for aggressive, loud, revolutionary rock. Pete Townshend was considered one of the most innovative guitarists in Britain. And then Jimi arrived and changed the conversation. Suddenly, The Who's destruction looked like theatrics compared to Jimi's sonic revolution. Pete's innovative techniques looked conventional compared to what Jimi was doing with feedback, distortion, and the whammy bar. The press started calling Jimi the most important guitarist in rock. Not one of the most important, the most important. And every article that said that felt like a personal attack on Pete's legacy. Pete tried to ignore it, told himself it was just press hype, that once people actually paid attention, they'd realize Jimi was just copying techniques British guitarists had developed and adding flashy showmanship. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Every time Pete picked up a guitar, he thought about Jimi. Every time The Who played a show, he wondered if people were comparing him unfavorably to Hendrix. Every time he read a music magazine, he'd see Jimi's name and feel something twist in his stomach. Jealousy. That's what it was. Pure, undeniable jealousy. And on a Tuesday evening in May 1967, on a TV show watched by 20 million people, that jealousy came spilling out. The show was one of Britain's most popular music programs.
When Jimi arrived, wild afro, colorful clothes, that easy confidence, Pete felt the jealousy intensify. The way everyone in the studio gravitated toward Jimi. The way people looked at him with something like awe. It should have been The Who getting that attention. They were British. They'd built this rock scene, and now this American was reaping the rewards. The host started the discussion segment by asking Pete about the current British rock scene. Pete gave diplomatic answers about innovation and competition, but then the host turned to the real question, the one he'd been building toward. Pete, everyone's talking about Jimi Hendrix. As one of Britain's premier guitarists, what do you think about what he's doing? It was meant to be a softball question, an opportunity for Pete to be generous, to welcome innovation, to show the camaraderie of the rock community. But Pete didn't feel generous. He felt angry. Honestly, Pete said, his voice tight, I think he's being overrated. The studio went quiet. The host's smile faltered. Jimmy, sitting a few chairs away, raised his eyebrows slightly but said nothing. What British guitarists have been doing for years, Jimmy comes in, adds a few gimmicks, plays with his teeth, plays behind his back, and suddenly everyone acts like he invented the guitar. It's not revolutionary, it's showmanship. It's copying what we've done and making it flashy. The studio audience was silent. This wasn't friendly competition. This was an attack, on live television, in front of 20 million viewers. The techniques he's using, Pete went on, unable to stop now that he'd started. Feedback, distortion, whammy bar manipulation, British guitarists pioneered those. The Who has been doing aggressive, innovative guitar work since before anyone in America heard of Jimi Hendrix. But an American comes over here, uses our techniques, adds some circus tricks, and gets called a genius? It's frustrating. It's like watching someone steal credit for work you did. The host didn't know what to do. He'd wanted controversy, but not like this, not a direct attack on another guest who was sitting right there. He looked at Jimmy, waiting to see if there would be an explosion. Jimmy's expression hadn't changed. He was still calm, still neutral, just listening, waiting for Pete to finish. So to answer your question, Pete concluded, looking directly at Jimmy for the first time, I think he's talented, but I don't think he's doing anything we haven't been doing, and I think the press needs to recognize that British rock built this foundation. We don't need Americans to show us how to play guitar in our own country. The silence that followed was excruciating. The studio audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay quiet. The host looked like he wanted to cut to commercial. And Pete sat there, his face flushed, adrenaline pumping, having just said everything he'd been thinking for months. The host cleared his throat. Well, Jimmy, would you like to respond to that? 20 million people leaned toward their television sets. This was going to be explosive. Jimi Hendrix had just been called a copycat, a fraud, a showman with no substance on national television by one of Britain's most respected rock musicians. Everyone expected anger, defensiveness, a counterattack. Jimmy was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled slightly, not smugly, but genuinely, and started talking. Pete Townshend is an incredible guitarist. The Who's work has been revolutionary. The way they use power chords, the way they build energy, the destruction as part of the performance, that influenced me tremendously when I first heard them. Pete's expression shifted slightly. This wasn't what he'd expected. I came to Britain because British rock inspired me. The Beatles, the Stones, the Who, the Yardbirds, you guys created something special here. The British invasion changed American music, changed how we thought about what rock could be. So when I got the opportunity to come here and play, I jumped at it, because this—
As for the showmanship, Jimmy continued, playing behind my back with my teeth, yeah, that's partly for show, but it's also about proving that the music isn't in the position of the guitar. It's in the understanding of sound. Pete destroys guitars on stage. That's showmanship too. But it's also making a statement about music and performance. We're both trying to push boundaries in our own ways. The host was nodding now, sensing that the tension was transforming into something more interesting. I have huge respect for Pete and the Who, Jimmy said. I've learned from their work, And if people are excited about what I'm doing, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of musicians like Pete, not stealing from them, learning from them. That's what all artists do." Jimmy paused and added, "I hope Pete and I can be friends because I'd love to learn more from him. And maybe I can share some things I've discovered too. That's what music should be about. Musicians pushing each other to be better, learning from each other, respecting each other's contributions." The studio audience applauded, not politely, enthusiastically, because they'd just witnessed something remarkable. Jimmy had "The talent doesn't need to diminish someone else to shine," Pete said. "That you can acknowledge influences without being accused of theft. That real confidence is shown through grace, not aggression." Jimi Hendrix is an incredible guitarist, not because he's stealing from British rock, but because he's building on it and taking it places we hadn't imagined. And instead of feeling threatened by that, I should be inspired by it. Pete looked down at his notes, then back up at the cameras. "I'd like to publicly apologize to Jimi Hendrix for the attack, for the accusations, for exposing my own insecurity by trying to diminish his talent. If he's willing, I'd like to sit down with him, learn from him, and hopefully build the friendship he generously offered last night when I certainly didn't deserve it." The press conference ended with applause, rare for a press event, and that evening, Pete Townshend showed up at the venue where Jimmy was performing, carrying his guitar. He found Jimmy backstage. "I owe you an apology in person," Pete said. Jimmy smiled. "You already apologized, pretty publicly. Takes courage to do what you did today." "I was jealous," Pete said. "You made me feel inadequate, and instead of learning from that, I attacked you." "I understand jealousy," Jimmy said. "I felt it too. We all have. But we don't have to let it control us." "Can I watch your show tonight? Learn from you, like you said?" "Better than that," Jimmy said. "Want to jam together after? Show each other what we've learned?" They did. And that night, Pete Townshend and Jimi Hendrix spent 3 hours playing guitar together, teaching each other techniques, pushing each other to try new things. The jealous attack had transformed into a friendship, and the public humiliation had become a masterclass in grace. Years later, after Jimmy's death, Pete Townshend was asked about that TV appearance, about the attack and the response, and what it taught him. "That night taught me that grace is more powerful than aggression, that responding to an attack with respect and humility doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong. Jimmy could have destroyed me with a counterattack. Instead, he destroyed my jealousy with grace, and he turned an enemy into a friend. That's genius, not just as a musician, but as a human being." "Do you regret the attack?" "Every day," Pete said. "But I'm grateful Jimmy showed me how to respond to it. He could have made me his enemy forever. Instead, he made me his student. That generosity, that's what I remember most about Jimi Hendrix. Not the guitar playing, though that was incredible. The grace, the humanity, the ability to turn an attack into an opportunity for connection. 20 million people watched me attack him, and 20 million people watched him show us all how to handle hatred with love." If this story of responding to attacks with grace inspired you, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who's facing criticism or attacks. Have you ever responded to aggression with grace and watched it transform the situation? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for more stories about the moments when dignity defeated hatred and grace changed everything.